thank you for turning up and listening to today's episode of the Business of Fun podcast. My guest is Stephen Cook. We have a great conversation about traveling productions, all kinds of industry trends and changes. This is a very, very interesting conversation. But first, before I tell you about what Steve and I talked about, a couple things. Today is Monday, September 30th. On October 2nd, that's in a couple days, I'm going to be hosting a free webinar, kind of a chat called Strategy 101, and that's going to be helpful for people all over the ticket industry and the business industry of some of the basics of strategy. And the reason I'm putting this out there now is because I've been working on a kind of a master class, if you will, or an executive education class called Markets and Competition, Strategy in Modern Times. And I want to share some of the ideas, see what works and what doesn't work with people, find out what's impactful for you. So that's going to be, the sign up for that will be in the show notes. If you have not already, make sure you sign up for the Talking Tickets newsletter. That's talkingtickets.substack.com. I have been very consistent about sharing new ideas. I'm trying to put some longer form ideas in there, mixed in with some shorter stuff, trying to do a little different things with it. But check it out, talkingtickets.substack.com. Get my website, davewakeman.com. Everything you need to know about me is there. So back to my friend Steve Cook. So Steve Cook is the CEO of TCG Entertainment. They put on traveling productions. The big one is Cirque Musica. The Cirque Musica Holiday Wonderland will be celebrating 15 years this holiday season. So that was my way to get Steve to come on, was the program. But really, I was curious because he has like this really, really cool background. Steve was the CMO of the Dallas Symphony. He's worked in amusements. He's kind of touched all over the industry. And it was really, I have been looking forward to having a chance to talk with Steve for a while. We talk about creating frameworks for your productions, non-traditional programming in the symphony. We talk about some of the trends that we're seeing in live entertainment right now. We talk a little bit about pricing. We talk about working with venues and partners. We talk about some of the things that need to go in to putting on a production. We talk about the idea marketing. We talk about COVID. We talk about a little bit about the secondary market. We talk about how deals have changed in the industry. We talk about touch on a little bit about the international markets. IP. It was like we really hit a lot of stuff. I think Steve says at one point, like, he come back, we did barely even touch the surface of what all the ideas. But this one's really great. Steve has so many like examples and stories to tell, and I think there's a lot for you to learn. So I'm gonna cut it short and get right to this conversation with Steve Cook on the Business of Fun podcast. All right. I'd like to welcome Steve Cook to the Business of Fun podcast. Steve, how's it going?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Oh, hanging in there. So I'm excited to talk to you. We had you gave me some very good topics that we can touch on, so this is going to be great. But I'm going to start with you have a Cirque Music. Am I saying that correctly, right?
Cirque Musica, yep.
Cirque Musica, okay. See, I can't read my own handwriting here. And it seems like you have created this really cool experience that you take around the country. The place I wanted to start, though, is when I was looking at the rundown of locations that you go to, is like how you're choosing the markets you're visiting. Because I was curious because I saw London, Ontario, which I have family in London, Ontario, Canada, and then Augusta, Georgia. Those are not necessarily markets that we always see as top picks to go to. So I want to start there if I can and ask you about how you how you decide where you're going to market.
So for Cirque Musica, we have multiple different productions of it. The holiday show, which is Cirque Musica Holiday Wonderland, we've in the past done anywhere between 1 to 2 units. This year we're doing 1 unit, really just because of the environment that we're in, which is not great. And so when we set the route, the goal is to do as many shows as we can during a set time frame. So we like to rehearse in Canada, and we start November, I think 7th, and our first show is the 13th. And the reason is that Thanksgiving in the U.S. isn't until late this year. I think it's the 28th, right? Mm-hmm. So in Canada, Thanksgiving's and I think like end of October. So we go up to Canada, we rehearse there. We can get 2 weeks in the holiday time frame before Thanksgiving in the U.S. Then we come down to the U.S. and we'll hit it all the way through Christmas. In terms of the markets, we do a variety of markets. We do a lot of repeat markets. Canada's really good for us. So is the U.S. And you had mentioned Augusta, great market for us. When you've been doing this as long as I have, you don't have to play New York City every day. You can go play Dayton, Ohio, and do great. Yeah. So it's a mix of big markets and small markets. The market is very competitive. A lot of holiday product out there. So we try to shift where we play with a mix of return markets, because a lot of venues want us back because we do the business and it's a good show, versus new markets and trying new markets out. So it's also the routing jigsaw puzzle, which is always a puzzle. Yeah. You can only go X amount of miles. The show travels every night. So we're in a different market every day. And so you've got to keep it within 300 miles type thing. So it leads you to all types of different places. But yeah, I mean, we try to do, the short answer is we try to do as many dates as we can from when we think the holidays start through, Christmas or soon thereafter.
Yeah, that's good, because Canada's right there, so it gives you an extra 2 or 3 weeks that you can totally operate in, free space, and that's really smart. And I was just curious because it's something I try to convince people. I go, you got to look into these some of these second tier, third tier markets that people call them, because I was like, people still live there. People still want to go do things. I was like, oh, you're leaving things on the table if you don't.
And also it's the deals too. I mean, it's the venue deals. And,
of course.
I remember I played Nassau Coliseum a couple of years ago, and my stage bill was $85,000. Yeah. And I looked at the venue manager and I'm like, what are we doing? Yeah. And he's like, I know, I agree. It's like, you can play New York, but if you're and we should, and we do, but you just got to balance it out with the cost of of stagehands and labor, but also the venue deals. Those are a big thing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Because everything has gone, at least when I see it, if it was expensive, super expensive in Nassau a few years back, it's probably 2 or 3 times as expensive now as some of the deals I see. And I might even be undershooting it a little bit.
It's the bane of our existence. If you talk to any producer right now, is buses and trucks. It is real. It's a real issue. Buses are 2 to 3 times what they were. And in my shows, if I've got 2, 3, 4 buses, you can't make it work. And it is a real issue. And we're talking to the buses companies and the trucks as well. It's a real issue for just touring these shows around, and how you can just make it work with the cost of these buses. Yeah.
Now, one thing you talked about that I want to come back to is you talked about the environment that we're operating in right now. And you said it's not great. First, that's usually when I talk to people and I ask them the question about that, they go, oh, it's a V-shaped recovery. Everything's puppies and rainbows. So I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
When you say it's not great, what are some of the challenges, some of the things that are good and bad that you're seeing?
So I told one of my directors, I said, our theme for 2024 is like the NCAA basketball tournament, survive and advance. That's the goal. And she's like, you've been saying that for the last 4 years. It really is. It's about surviving and advancing. Yeah. And there's a couple parts to it. I mean, one, you've got the expenses, as I mentioned, buses, trucks, that is just way too high, and it doesn't justify the gas and those type of things. That's not, I think, what we're dealing with. I think we're dealing with, frankly, companies that are just trying to charge as much as they can. And it's a real issue. And not just for us, it's for all producers and everyone that does what we do. The cost of cast and crew, that is sort of back in line. I think. I mean, this year when we put a cast announcement for Cirque Musica, we had almost 3,000 applications for it to be on our cast. So I think that's gotten in line, but the expenses are a real issue. I think the venues are dealing with it and the promoters are dealing with it. And so just trying to match that versus, what we need to get these shows out versus what they want to offer, I think is a balance that we have to go through. I do think, our sales are really strong for Cirque Musica. Cirque Musica has been around for 15 years. It's a really, I think we're probably the second or third biggest Cirque show in the industry. It's known, it's good, it's quality. The buyers know it, the patrons know it. And so because of that, I think our sales are very good and solid, right? Yeah. And so I think that has enabled us to sort of get through a market, which I think I call it the haves and the have-nots. We've been seeing softness in if you talk to any Broadway producer, they've been seeing it on the road. They've been seeing it in New York. The theater shows, like it's been there for a while. And now what I'm hearing, I was talking to the president of a very big booking agency a couple weeks ago, and he's got a couple $1 million night artists. Like, they're okay. Everyone else not okay. And so I think you're now seeing it in arenas, you're seeing it in amphitheaters, you're seeing all the softness. It's everywhere. Yep. And so we as producers have to be smart about it, in terms of what we put out. We've pulled a lot of shows off the market, might not Cirque, but like other shows, we pulled them off to get through this election. And I think that, our goal is really 2025 and really, we're working on deals and IP deals and those type things to, hopefully a year from now we'll be in a different place. But
yeah, and that sort of tracks right with everything that I see, because I was even at a show recently, which is like, it was an artist that probably maybe not that top tier, but like barely below it, and they were like probably 75 or 75% show sold in a place where they would be completely clean. Yeah. Right. And it was a great lineup, a great show, and 75%. So that seems right. And the Broadway people definitely behind all of the good PR they give themselves are telling me they really haven't seen the rebound that they thought they would from everything. But like your colleague was saying, you've been saying this for the last 4 years, and I would just tell people, like, look at the world that we've been operating in for 4 years, and you understandably have to adjust your expectations and the way you've approached the business. And I think in some places there's been a little reluctance to that, but
everyone I talk to, when you're talking direct to them, they say the same thing really bad. The only one that hasn't said that is a friend who works for, let's call him a very, very large promoter, and they're like, oh, we're doing great. And I was like, it's like, yeah, but we're doing a lot of volume. So I think that, if you're doing many shows, if you have a loser, it's okay because you got many shows. Yeah. So I just think that's what it is. But I mean, for us, for TCG, what we're doing is we've got big projects with Cirque. We also are taking our Batman in concert to Australia. We're doing a whole Australia tour all through October, November, December. So, but we're really focused on next year, and I think that's where the focus has got to be.
Well, that's great. That's great to know that Batman is going to Australia, because there are a lot of people who listen to the podcast that listen in Australia, because I've been there a few times. So that's pretty good. So let me ask you this then, because I was curious about how you put the things together. You talked about Cirque Musica being something you created on your own. Do you have a framework that you use to create productions, like a sort of pattern?
I'll tell you how Cirque Music came about. I in my career, my first 7 or 8 years of my career, I was with Feld Entertainment. I was a marketing director for Feld, Brindley Brothers Bar and Bailey, Disney on Ice. So I lived in that world. Like I learned circus, right? And my actually territory was the winter quarters, so I was there for all the rehearsals. So I would watch them put these shows together, and I really got to spend time with Kenneth Feld, who is the best, and he's still, a colleague and someone I talked to. He actually came to my shows a couple of years ago, and which was great. And so I took that, and then my experience with the symphony world, I was at the Dallas Symphony, and I was like, if we can create something where people can listen to great repertoire, but also be entertained, that's how Cirque Musica started. So it started in the symphony space, and it still works in the symphony space. But how it's sort of progressed, from there to what it is now is major holiday, tour. We also did a massive deal with the Juan Gabriel estate a couple years ago. So we created Carita, which was the official celebration of Juan Gabriel, a Cirque Musica production in Mexico City. It did over 200 shows in 22 and 23. It's coming to the U.S. hopefully next year. So we've taken this brand, and now we've got a symphony version, and we've got a Latino version, and we've got a holiday version, and we've got a couple other ones in the pipeline. And so when we put them together, take the holiday show, for example, what my goal with that is to create something that is very high level, very entertaining, and really something that can reach families. It's a very family show. Also, let's call it the Broadway show, but really something that is a little more direct. And what I mean by that is some Cirque shows can be very ethereal and sort of be way all over the place. Our shows are more pretty straightforward. We have a definite theatrical Broadway element, to it, that we have storylines and actors and singers and dancers that are telling a story. And the Cirque performers are I think the best in the world. And we really try to get the best performers in the world. So what I mean by that is if I can find an act, that can really keep the audience's attention for, 6 minutes straight on, that's what I want, versus having 30 people on stage running around doing things. Right. Mm-hmm. So when we put it together, we're like, storyline, what is that? What's sort of the how do we weave it together? What's the music? And then performers, I want the top performers that can really engage with an audience and give them something, that's different and really engage into them. That's what we try to do. No, and we try to keep something, that's under 2 hours because of people's minds of short attention span. So we try to do it within that sort of that time frame as well.
No, I mean, that to me is great. It sounds a little bit like something I try to get people to think about all the time, which is kind of like mash up the ideas. So you're talking about like, I want entertainment plus the symphony, and I mash it together to make something that is appealing to people, right? And it's I like the way you use direct, right? It's not esoteric. It's like going, I'm not gonna make you jump through hoops to figure out the story. I'm telling you, I'm gonna give you the story.
And it was funny when we started the holiday show. It had a symphony, it had a 40-piece symphony, 50-piece symphony with it. And a couple of years ago, my agents were like, drop the symphony. And I'm like, well, I like the symphony. They're like, the buyers don't care. Drop it. And so I was like, well, I like it. So we went back and forth. And so that show now has a lot less musicians on it. And it just makes it more tourable. Because again, going back to your other question, is like, I make beautiful shows. I make beautiful shows that are tourable. Yep. And that is important. We've all seen, projects that are amazing and massive, and they're too big. And they don't work. You got to make something that works not only for the audience, but it's got to work for the buyer. And when I mean the buyer, the venue, the promoter, and that's something that we take really seriously. We want to have a turnkey show that is easy for the buyer. It makes a great, show day from the second we get there to the second we leave. I always, not only myself, but I instruct my tour managers. We always thank the buyers for having us, like they're the clients. And I think that you can't get too big where you don't understand who's supporting you to get you where you're at. And that's something that's really important to us.
Yeah. Well, it's the idea that like you have more than one customer. Like you're obviously entertaining the crowd, but you also need to make sure that the venue's happy because they're the people who are really 100%. Allowing you to serve the other customer. Right. And it's often difficult to convey that idea to people.
It's important, and I tell this with my crews and my cast, I know when you're week 4 and you've week 6 days in a row and you're tired and all that, you still are representing my company and my show. And we have an expectation of being easy to work with and nice to work with and high level professional on and off stage. Like that's how we roll. That's how we do it. Yeah. And that's the expectation. Yeah. And for anything that we produce.
Yeah. So I'm curious then, because you talked about, you got to make it tourable, you got to make it work for people, which obviously should be top of mind. But I've seen things that are completely unwieldy, and like you're like going, well, why isn't it moving, or why don't people want this, or why can't we find the venues? And you're like, oh, well, because it's gonna take forever. It's a pain in the ass. I mean, how much research do you do? And I'm curious about that from both the understanding how best to serve your customers, which are the venues, but then also like, so you're serving their customers and your customers as well, because I'm kind of always curious about that.
Well, it's funny. I'll tell a story. There's a couple of years ago, there was an arena show that came out based on a very high level, one of the most famous series on televisions. And I remember like the composer was like, oh, I just have this idea of like, I want to do this and it's going to be massive and this. And we're like, it's going to tank. And it did. We're like, it ain't going to work. So I think, again, what we try to do is, we want to do something that's amazing. And I talk to IPs all the time. We want to create something that's amazing that will work, because the last thing you want is something wonderful to go out and it closes up for 2 months. So in terms of research, any of our productions, we try to, going a step back when we're talking to, to IP studios, because TCG has a couple buckets. We have IP that we own, Cirque Musica, Night of Symphonic Rock, Rewind, like that is our IP. We also have, a lot of great relationships with, like, for example, Warner Brothers Discovery. We have DC Films and Concert, which is a global deal. We have deals with Banjay and Shine. We've got MasterChef, and we have the rights to Wipeout and MasterChef Junior. We've got, deals with MGM for Rocky and Legally Blonde, and, Tony Bennett Estate, and on and on and on. We get a lot of those, both incoming and outgoing, in terms of interest on, do we want to do these shows? And that's something we always try to look at. We call them test balloons, to send to the buyers and say, okay, we're talking about this, what do you think? And get feedback from them on that. So that's the research step one. Is this something that we think the buyers are going to want? Mm-hmm. Now, part of it is, our intuition, and we're risk takers. I mean, if you're in this business, you are a risk taker. We try to, we make as best educated guess that we can on if this is a IP that we want to invest time and money into. Mm-hmm. Once we do that, then we go into show development mode, and we go to booking mode. I think one of our strong suits is our distribution strategy. So what I mean by that is we have in-house agents that work the symphonic market, the theater PAC market. Like we know the symphony market like nobody else. Like we talk to them every day and we know it. And so I think that is sort of one segment. And then we also work with a number of different agencies, the big ones and some of the small ones, to get our products out. And that's big, because you can have a great show and a great idea, but if you can't get it out, you can't. So we've developed those relationships. So we rely heavily on our agents. We work with, concept agency with Matt Charco. We work with Wasserman. We work with William Morris. We work with all of them. And we rely on them a lot, and we put a lot of ideas in front of them. Like, we're going to get the rights to this. What do you think? And they'll tell us. And so that's before we ever do something. That's sort of the part. Once we do it, then in terms of the show development, again, we try to create, something that is entertaining, true to the brand, and something that is, again, tourable. Those are sort of the criteria. Then once we get into it, we constantly want feedback from our buyers. We ask for it. What do they think? Any improvements? Those type things. We're constantly, it's a continual feedback cycle. As I mentioned, I think we pride ourselves trying to be the most user-friendly show out there. That's what we try to be. Because the reality is, these buyers, these venues, these promoters, these symphonies, they got a lot going on. And the last thing they need is a show that's a pain. They just don't, they got too much going on. And so we really try to thread that needle with them.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, I go, one of the secrets is that I'm user friendly. So I completely get that. It's don't make it any harder for people to give you their money than it needs to be. make it as easy as possible. I mean, that's
Yep.
like a good way, a good rule to live by. So let me ask you this, because this is another thing that I found pretty interesting about your background. We kind of touched on a few of these ideas. But you were started out at Feld with Disney on Ice, the Ringling Brothers, all those cool things, um, and then you moved to the Dallas Symphony, and where you were I believe, the chief marketing officer.
Yep.
And
Actually,
that,
and between Fun that I had a very short stint at Madame Tussauds in Vegas. And then I was with Theme Park World. I was in Brand at Universal Studios in Florida. And then I was the director of marketing at Six Flags over Texas. So I was in Theme Park World and then went to Symphony World.
yeah, and I thought that was correct, but I didn't want to go too far afield in the question, but the point of it was that is not a typical path for, especially to a symphony CMO.
Yep.
Now, so I'm curious, how do you pull something like that off? Because I think one of the challenges that see when I'm dealing with people in the symphony is they can be a little bit dogmatic about the way that they approach the job. And, the statistics I see for symphony attendance is down pretty significantly. So talking to you, it was like going, how can I shake people out of this mindset? Because you obviously touched on all these really cool things, kind of like I told you before, where I did nightclubs, before I did sports, before I did theater, before I did all B2B stuff. What advice do you have for people?
Well, when the symphony was recruiting me, I was at Six Flags, and I was looking for something that was a little more back in the live entertainment space, and something where I could use sort of my entrepreneurial skills more. And I said, listen, I don't know anything about the symphony repertoire, but I know how to sell tickets. That's what I know how to do. And so what we did is I brought in a team of people from sports teams, entertainment, the Dallas Stars, hockey, those type things. And that's how we, basically went about the business. When I came into it, they were buying NPR and the classical radio station and all that stuff. I'm like, we're not doing that. We have at the DSO, they were doing 21 classical weekends a year. Some were triples, some were quads. So let's say they had to sell between 6,000 and 8,000 classical tickets a weekend for 21 weekends, just for classical. Then you had pops, and then you had all these extra services that I found that they were using. So we went into a general market. I did all my relationship with the TV stations, the Dallas Morning News, and radio stations, the country station and the soft rock. We did it with all of them, and we made it about entertainment, and and that's how we did it. And we had record ticket sales for the times I was there. Every year we were breaking records, and because we were making a lot more accessible and just more of a evening out. In addition to serving, the real core subscribers, for those classical concerts, we also created, I think, what do we call it? Dallas Symphony Presents, which are basically commercial hybrid type shows, and we were leader in that, and that thing was generating millions in revenue and really helping balance the budget. And so, we took that, and that's sort of how TCG started. Is a person who was on the board was sort of like, why, what are you doing here? And I was like, well, and he's like, well, yeah, but you should be doing your own thing. And I'm like, well, that's great, but I've got a wife and a 1-year-old child, so I really can't do that. And so he was great and very supportive and sort of helped me make that jump, because when you make the jump from company to starting your own business, it's a different ballgame. And I admire anyone that does it, because it's hard. And it's a grind, and it's really, really hard to do it. And so but we made it. I made the jump with the mindset of, when I started the company, was to basically bring the symphony world into more of an entertainment world. And I think that we have been somewhat successful and somewhat not successful on it, in the sense of, as you said, it's a very insular group that thinks a certain way. And the fact is, the market is changing. and it has changed. And we talked a little bit about, Fever and what they're doing with their candlelight concerts. They're having amazing success on a global basis. They're selling millions and millions of tickets. And I think the market will change. And you see things like, and again, this isn't my show, but you look at The Last Airbender, Avatar Last Airbender that's out, which is a symphonic show showing clips of that series, and they're doing I don't know, 150 dates, 200 dates around the world, like it's killing it. So the market is changing, and I think in symphonic space in particular, and I talk to symphonies about this all the time. The ones that want to change with it and go with it and lean into it, I think will have more success. The ones that want to stay into their bubble, I think they're gonna struggle. I think you're seeing it already. Yeah. So not only TCG but others are sort of like, okay, we're gonna, we're moving forward. And so either if you want to come along, great, and if you don't, no, you don't. I think that's just how the market's gonna shake itself out.
Yeah.
Long answer to your question, but I think that's sort of what we're seeing.
No, it was a great answer because it really hits on one of the key lessons that I try to teach in any of the brand management classes I do is that first you got to pay attention to your non-customers. And every class I'm like, pay attention to people who aren't buying from you because they're doing something, right? If they're in the market for, in this case, entertainment, they're doing something. Why aren't they coming to you? Like, what are you doing wrong? Right. Because, and I think, and this would be where I'm asking you the question. I think it starts with the mindset, right? The mindset often is that like, they don't understand. It's on the customer. It's like, for me, studying marketing and communications, if I don't get my message across, I'm the one who's failing, not them. They don't care, right. and so I'm always curious, like, how do we change that mindset for people? How do we get people to say, like, look, get out of your own bubble for a second and turn around and look at it from the point of view of the customer? Because that's really what this like success is about. Like you took
and you talked about brand, like we are all about the brand. And I say that, in our graphics and our materials and all that, like we really spend a lot of time and money on that to make sure that we have really good brand and brand guides and all those type things. And I think a lot of it, what I tell people, this is a relationship business and, we value our relationships a lot. I have unfortunately seen, in some segments that it's more transactional and it's more, we'll call you when we need you type thing. And that's one way to do it, but that's not how we do it. We're all about the relationships and we help people. Like we'll help. I get a lot of calls from whether it's an orchestra or a buyer, like I need this or an issue or whatever it is, and we help them with it. And so I think the relationship part of the business is really, really important for us. And that's how we built TCG is very much relationship oriented and trying to help, these clients from the beginning to the end. Mm-hmm. That's how we look about it.
Yeah, no, that's a tremendous point of view too. It's like, it goes back to even in the start is like if somebody needs something, I kind of would always joke with people. I'd be like, well, when everything's hit the fan, I'm usually even a better partner to you than when things are going smoothly. And then people remember you for being that person, and that will buy you a lot of goodwill.
Oh yeah, I mean during COVID, like we were helping people left and right, and it's interesting because we're a very efficient, nimble company. That's how I run it. And so when COVID hit, we actually expanded. We actually went and got deals and did, lined up shows for the next 3 years and bought equipment and, all those type things. Whereas others, were not, Cirque du Soleil declared bankruptcy and laid up 95% of the people. You know what I mean? And that we use the time to go and expand and do deals and try to sort of look to the future. It was tough. I mean, it still is tough. But
still is tough, yeah.
We're still looking at the future.
Yeah, well, and that was something I was curious about too. Is like I know you've been growing a lot, and you've seen the change, and we talked about a little bit of it. Like right now, 2024, you're kind of hanging on, get to next year, because costs are still a little bit out of line with like what they historically would be. what other changes, good and bad, or have you seen that, that are guiding you, as you're in this growth phase?
Well, I see, what I see in the IP world, I see a lot of layoffs, and it's not good. I'm seeing a lot of these big, company structures. I mean, just in the past couple of months with Paramount and Universal and like good people, which are all getting laid off. And I think that's pretty scary, where it's at, from their point of view. I mean, so we're seeing that. We're seeing a lot of cutbacks, and, I just think, and we're seeing a lot of sort of negative market factors. And so, again, how we run the company is lean enough that we can see it through the bad times and the good times. And we also lean into our relationships with the studios, and those have changed. Those deals have changed. It's a lot of these studios in the past would come wanting big, MGs, minimum guarantees, for their IP up front, and that world doesn't exist anymore. It has changed. And so I think that the types of deals have changed and how the deals are run have changed. And so we have to, and they have to sort of adjust with that. I am seeing, the international market. I mentioned, Australia, we have going on. We took Batman to England and Paris this year. We did a lot of Europe dates last year with it. So I'm seeing the international stuff come about. As I mentioned, we had our Cirque Musica Carita show in Mexico for over 200 performances, and we were supposed to be down there for, I think, 6 weeks. We were there for like 8 months or something. So I'm seeing the international market rebound and be good. But one thing that we haven't talked about is ticket prices. We are sticklers.
You come to my favorite part of the discussion.
Whereas we again, our shows are, the venues set our ticket pricing, but we're pretty sticklers on that. We try to really keep our ticket prices, on a low level. We don't have control over these service fees and these handling fees and all this stuff, which drives us nuts like everyone else. But from what we can control, the ticket pricing, we really try to be smart about that. You just have to be smart about what people can afford. Family of four, if they're coming to our shows, I don't want them spending, whatever, $800 to come to. We want to be able to go and have a good experience at a good ticket price. That's our goal, and that's working with the venues and the promoters where we can to try to accomplish that how we can.
That the reason and the way you said that is kind of music to my ears, because it's like there's so many people that talk to me, they go, well, they will pay it, that $800 a family. I go, but just because somebody can do it doesn't necessarily mean you want them to, because there's just a crazy connection. So you're working with your partners, the promoters, the venues, and internally, how are you coming up with a good price here? Because I talk to people about how to set the price the right way a lot of times, and I think it's a mystery.
I think that is that theory of raising prices because you can. I think that's coming home to roost. We're seeing it where people are like, yeah, we're up. I'm like, well, yeah, because you raise your prices by double. So your attendance is down, but your pricing's up. Like, that's not a long-term strategy. That's a short-term strategy. We're in for the long haul. Again, our shows have been around for a long time, and they will be around for a long time. And so we're not about the fast money grab. Like, that's not what we're about. We're about trying to provide a great show. And again, the balance of that is that, we'll have some, people will say, what, can your show be, whatever, this much bigger? And I'm like, I can build whatever show you want. I can build $1 million show. I can build a $50 million show, and would love to do that. But it's got to be something that is, what's the ROI on it, and who's paying for it, and how many tickets we got to sell. Like, it's all a balance, right? And I think that's sort of, if we have a secret sauce, I think that's our secret sauce, is that we could sort of find that of building something great, but also something that is feasible within the market. And so, we try to work on the ticket pricing. It's not, again, the answer is not just charging more and more and more. That's not for us, that's not the answer. It's got to be something that a family can afford, and, have a great experience, but something that is realistic. And again, we're more, as I mentioned, that we're seeing that. Like we're seeing that people have done that. They're coming. The numbers are coming down. They're canceling shows. Like we're seeing it. And I don't want to say we're immune to it per se. We're just trying to be ahead of it.
Yeah, no, that's that is, I get the same conversation. People go, "Oh, look at our numbers; they're doing great." And I go, "Look at the number of tickets you sold." And then my favorite one too is like, and this is like completely outside of the conversation a little bit, but it's how many people sell tickets to their brokers. And then I'm like going, well, of course you sold a whole bunch of stuff to your brokers, but how many of those tickets got scanned? Right. And
I hate those calls when I get someone says, I paid, whatever, $600. I'm like, no, you didn't. You paid us like 70, whatever our ticket price is. You paid the broker the other X.
Yeah.
Wasn't coming to us, and I think that is a real issue. The other thing I think that we do which is I think a little bit different, like, VIPs and VIP experiences and all those things. Like for our Cirque shows, we do a VIP experience where they get to come backstage and meet performers. They get to do all this kind of stuff. All that revenue goes into the gross. That revenue goes in to the gross to help the venue / promoter, break even. Mm-hmm. A lot of artists will take all that money for themselves. We don't do that. We put it into the gross. And I think it's just sort of, I hope that's sort of a reason why they book our show versus others, because we're trying to help them, That's another way we're trying to help them get to where they need to be so they break even and make money and, book the show again.
Well, it's, you have taken, at least to me, what I would consider the right approach, which is like going, I'm not here for the next year. I'm here for the next 20 years. And so that's going to make me make different decisions than I would if I wanted to make a money grab. And to me, that's the right way. And I think this, talking about the prices like this is like, what is your end game, right? Are you just trying to get in and get out? Then you can maximize the thing and you can charge $800. But if I want to keep coming back and have it be able to do it year in year, then I want to consider this, because I want the people to have a good time. I want them to feel like they got value for money.
Yep.
I want them to create memories so that they come back again, because then it's like, instead of I might get, it was the way when I used to price drinks at the bar, I would be like going, I can charge you probably $10 for this drink, but if I charge you $7 and you buy 2, you're going to feel like a little bit better and you had a better experience. My incremental cost is about 35, 40 cents probably at the time. So I'm going to end up making more money. The person's going to feel better. They're going to come back, and I'm going to have built a relationship with them. And it's the same sort of thing, but it's very hard to get people to always see that, because sometimes it's pressures from above. Sometimes it's just point of view. I mean, there's a lot of challenges.
Yep.
But Steve, where can people find you on the internet?
So website is tcgent.com. LinkedIn, I think it's under Stephen Cook. And we also have a TCG LinkedIn page. What email is info@tcgent.com. Our show sites like cirquemusica.com, dcfilmsandconcert.com. We've got, sites for everything. But yeah, that's how to find us.
Yeah, I noticed that there's a similar feel to all of them, so I like that from a branding point of view. But Steve, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much. It's really nice talking with you.
Tell me what you thought about my conversation with Steve by sending me an email. It's my name, Dave, at davewakeman.com. Check out the Dave Wakeman website at davewakeman.com. Blogs, new events, the store, the whole deal, everything's there. You can sign up for newsletters. If you haven't and you don't get talking tickets and you're listening to this, you can get that at talkingtickets.substack.com. I cover all the things about how to help you sell more tickets. There's also the business of value, so just check out the website, davewakeman.com. Find out what you need there. Do me a favor. You've made it 45 minutes almost into this podcast, so I know you love this thing. Share it with some friends, right? Some colleagues, some people who learn from people like Steve, Angela Maleka, all the people I've been talking to lately. I'm going to even put some new things in there. I think I'm going to put the top 10 list I did for Tom Elmer's marketing class in here. I've got a few things that we'll do. So share this. Also rate it and review it. It helps me get great guests like Steve Cook. It helps people find me, and it helps, raises awareness for the podcast. So I appreciate it. As always, make sure you let me know what's going down. Any guests you'd like to hear from, any questions I can answer for you, anything that will make the Business of Fun, talking tickets, my website, whatever useful and valuable to you, send me a note, dave@davewakeman.com. Let's see what we can do. Okay. Until next time, I thank you so much for being here and listening. I will talk to you soon. Take it easy.